Good evening. Welcome to Concert 2 of Time Spans 2024. With me are Brigitta Muntendorf, composer, and Amadeus Regucera. Brigitta is the composer of the piece tonight. She's professor in Cologne, Germany. We're very glad she's here tonight. And Amadeus is music curator of EMPAC, Experimental Music and Performing Arts Center in Troy, and also in charge of the performing arts curating currently at EMPAC. Amadeus has made it possible to have a rehearsal period at EMPAC with Brigitta and Ning Yu and Cory Smythe last week, where the pieces were rehearsed, produced, and recorded. I will ask Amadeus to please say a few words about EMPAC, and I'm very grateful that he made it possible that we could do all of this. And I really believe EMPAC should have a platform here. Would be absolutely phenomenal if in New York City we had a place like this performance space. And then the two of them will talk about Brigitta and Brigitta's music.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Thomas, and thank you all for coming. My name is Amadeus Regucera. Like Thomas said, I'm the music curator at the Curtis R. Priam Experimental Media and Performing Arts Center at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. Just a short 2.5-hour Amtrak ride. Come anytime. I'm always happy to give tours. But like Thomas said, it was originally intended to be the Experimental Music and Performing Arts Center, but we're the Experimental Media and Performing Arts Center because we work with a host of artists across disciplines. There are actually 2 other curatorial positions, the time-based visual arts and dance and theater, and we all collaborate on various projects in any stage of development, whether they're just commissioned, don't exist yet, whether they're in the stage that Brigitta's piece came to us, which is finished, but needs to be produced and rehearsed, like a formidable piece, as Thomas said, but we had a lot of fun. We have one of our audio engineers back there, Jeff Svatek, who's on staff at EMPAC, helping us with sound tonight. And so for more information, visit empac.rpi.edu. But yeah, so tonight's piece, Trilogy for 2 pianos and live electronics, which I think doesn't even begin to describe the kind of experience we'll have tonight. Maybe you can just talk to us a little bit about how this piece came about. 2014, right?
Yeah, it has this 10th anniversary. The first movement, the other one were written later. First of all, Amadeus, thank you so much. In artist's words, what is EMPAC? It's a paradise. So I never had such good conditions to rehearse a piece because the Trilogy has so much electronics. The 2 pianists are like the extension of this apparatus, which I could call it. And they have mics on the chest, another mic inside the piano. It's running a live patch. So it was really nice to have these conditions. And originally it was a commission, the first movement of the Grau-Schumacher piano duo. It was performed at the Eclat Festival. It's a festival of a broadcast in Germany. I mean, all the contemporary music is actually based on broadcast festivals. And I did some experiments with contact mics in the piano and a little analog effect device. And then I worked in the SWR experimental studio in Freiburg to make it a little bit more professional, let's say. And I came there with the sounds that I had in mind. And then they built a patch, and I could work for 2 weeks with this patch and design the sounds which I like to use. And this was actually the beginning of this.
Before I ask you, I'm curious about your sound world, but before I ask you, you mentioned that the first movement, Key of Presence, tonight we're hearing all 3 movements, but they are actually developed over the course of 4 years, 5 years, and so in a way they're discrete pieces. Did you know that they were going to be one single piece when you finished Key of Presence at SWR Experimental Studio?
No, I didn't know. I just wanted to write this one piece, but then the collaboration was so nice, and I had the feeling that I would like to go on. And now I have 3 pieces. Sometimes I think, it can be, it's 3, but it can also be 10 or whatever. But 3 is quite nice. And I developed the third movement and second time, and the second movement was the last one I did.
So, thinking about this, the sounds that we're all going to hear tonight, how would you describe it? What kind of sounds were you looking for? Because when I hear it, there's a very active, kinetic, kind of hard-edged, but also tongue-in-cheek, ironic kind of sound world with texts and beat boops and just scraping and just very sculpted sound.
Somehow I was looking actually for sounds which can describe a little bit this idea of vanishing or disappearance, or the relation between presence and absence. And what is presence? It could be a hit. It could be something that marks, hey, I'm here. And what is absence? Perhaps a sound that disappears. But you can perhaps also hear in the whole trilogy that I grew up with 2 different sound worlds. So the classical sound world, which I explored through the piano, but then also the electronic music, the club music. And somehow there, in between, there is a kind of a liminal space in which I think that this piece is somehow placed. Because on the one hand, there is this approach of the contemporary music in terms of structure, in terms of thinking, of processes, in terms of perhaps a kind of virtuosity in things, how meanings, references, sounds are combined with each other. And then on the other hand, there is this idea of sounds which come more from the popular context, or which are produced perhaps more in the way pop music or electronic music is produced.
Yeah, you spoke about presence and absence. I think that in many ways this piece has a lot to do with memory. Music being that art form that kind of exists just on the edge of being a thing. I wrote here, and this is where my PhD comes out. It doesn't make any sense. The memory of a presence that constitutes its absence. So you've talked in the past about paradoxes between the two. And you just hinted at this, but what kind of, can you speak about the different aspects of the piece, whether it's the music itself, the piano music, or this piece has a lot of theatrical elements. Maybe you can speak of some of those materials, how they sort of address these concepts.
So actually every movement has one specific idea regarding these topics of absence and presence. And the first one, Key of Presence, is this idea of the apparatus, like the piano, which is, so you hit the keys, but you hit the inside, you hit yourself, so as if the body would be the extension. If you think about this piano as a kind of machine, then actually you could think about, okay, it's perhaps about this attempt how to overcome this machine. As a player, and what is the machine? Perhaps it's the machine that we create or we step in every day, or the machine that incorporates us. So no matter what you do, it will appropriate you, so it will take you inside. And this means somehow that an absence is appearing somehow. And in the second movement, this is a little bit dedicated to Bernd Auli Zimmermann, a German composer who is perhaps not so known here, but he was about 50 years ahead of his time, I think. He wrote pieces that had worked a lot with references in the 50s, 60s, when it was more about form and ideas of Stockhausen. And it was the last piece he wrote before he committed suicide, and it was a piece that is really circling about itself. So it's called KreisIncrease, and Kreis means in German just circle. Increase is increasing the circling. And this is, I took this piece, which I love very, very much, and I just pitched it very deep down and created kind of a sub-bass, which is underneath the whole piece. And the two pianists are a little bit like, it's not about development, but it's also not about a soundscape. They are like, it's as if there would be already a rhythmical structure exist, or a structure in general, and they just try to complete this puzzle. So we'll see a lot of complementary movements. And the third one, Key of Absence, there are a lot of quotes are passing actually the paths of the pianists, quotes from the past, but also quotes from movies. And this is a little bit like the idea that somehow memory could be something that tells us, yeah, we are present. But at the same time, what is very absurd, I think, is that the two very significant happenings in our life we don't explore, or we don't remember. It's our birth and it's our death. So somehow, so as if we would just live in between these things. So they actually try. I think it's in all the pieces. They are kind of virtuosic, and you always see two people that trying to work quite hard to overcome it.
Yeah, I think somewhere you've written that the virtuosity of the players here kind of tries to prevent the disappearance of the music in some ways. So, and just for the listeners here, I think they would be curious. The quotations in the last movement. Can you tell us maybe a little bit of where you've taken them from? Maybe what they are. I think some of them might be familiar.
Some of them might be familiar. So it's, for example, from Beethoven, Fidelio, this moment when somebody sings like this, Wo kommst du her, where are you from? So where do you go? It's one quote from a song of Hugo Wolf, Do you know the country where the citrons are blossoming? I think it's in English. It's about a fictional country. So, there are quotations of Lost in Translation, I think, from the movies.
Bill Murray.
Bill Murray. Perhaps you explore even more. I think from Strauss is also one there. And these were quotes that just passed my path when I was composing the piece. So suddenly I had something in mind. And I think quotes are always, they remind us perhaps to specific situations. Mm-hmm. So I had to think about moments when I listened to these quotes, and perhaps you will experience something similar.
Yeah. Or, these quotations might mean, different things to different people. Lost in translation, I remember where I was as an undergraduate and what I was going through. And so when I hear that, I'll have different connotations which bring that kind of different experience to the same event. But I wanted to end with the question about your work in general. I know your most recent piece was a piece for 3D audio, AI. Was it opera? Orbit?
It's a space oratorio, I call it.
Space oratorio, yeah. And you've worked recent pieces, Melancholia, which is, I think you called it a trans-digital music theater piece, and then Archipel, which is interesting because you worked with an architect to create a set that was also playable. So you worked with architects and a dance troupe, I guess, playing the architecture. There was video, electronics. So you work in the sort of transmedia, very interdisciplinary, very EMPAC friendly, this world. And here we have, it is a theatrical piece, but you're working very much with an instrumentation that has that has repertoire and long history in the Western classical tradition. So I just want to ask where this work situates itself in your larger compositional project.
Yeah, somehow I regularly write instrumental pieces with electronics, but actually I have always the feeling that sound by itself is already theatrical. And I always think like the echo, for example. So if I say something and you repeat me, let's say, then actually that my words are coming from another source, for example. That's already a very theatrical act. And in this piece, sometimes I think it's a little bit like an opera, and it's very similar to the 3D audio space oratorio, in which I had the idea to make a music theater without anybody on stage. So to say, is it possible to make a music theater in absence, so of protagonists? So how can the space be our performative element? And here it is, I see also the trilogy as something that is transdigital because it transfers so many images, at least to me. I hope I can share it with you. That's something of course more than the sound just appears.
Well, I don't want to give too much more away, and I just want to say it's been a pleasure and a lot of fun working with you and Ning and Cory and Levy at EMPAC this past week, and it's a privilege to be able to present this here today for all of you, and I'm really excited to hear tonight's performance. So thank you.
Me too. Thank you too.